Hi, my name is Carter Razink, CEO and co-founder of DropChain. Today, we're going to show you how to mint your first token or NFT using DropChain 100% no code with this tutorial. If you haven't yet, create a free dropchain.network account and go through the quick start guide. We'll have a link below that lets you get started and walks you through everything you'll need to have in order to jump right in. Right here, we're starting on the DropChain console, which you can get once you log into your DropChain console and you hit the API dashboard button. And this has all the information you're going to need to get started. Your app ID, which is your unique app identifier, as well as your API keys, which we'll generate here in a moment, and then your test accounts, which will allow you to interact with the DropChain API, create NFTs, send them from test account 1 to test account 2, and basically just get your feet wet. So for this example, we're going to create a Postman account, and this is just a tool that allows you to test out APIs. You can use anything really you want to, but in this instance, we're going to use Postman. We'll have a link below. Create a free account and get started in like less than a minute. For this instance, though, we're going to go here and we're going to create a workspace, which allows us to test out different APIs. We're just going to create a workspace. Create a blank workspace, DropChain, API tester. For this case, I'm just going to make it for myself. And cool. We're going to create a collection. We'll call it DropChain APIs. Add a request. And so there's a few configurations that are important. And before I go too much farther, I'm right on here. I'm at the Git books, the DropChain docs, right? We have a bunch of documentation and guides to show you how to get started. For here, we're going to go through how to mint your first NFT or token. We have a guide exactly for you. If you go here, you see a few versions of how to do this. We have our Python SDK, so if you know how to code, this is great. You can kind of dive right in. Again, we have a JavaScript fetch, which is a simple post request with this body. And we also have a curl. And so we're just going to look at the curl for now, because this is the most basic version of an API request. And I'm going to kind of break it down. So first of all, you'll notice the curl is sending a request and it has post. And so the first thing we're going to have to change is we're going to change this from get to post. We're also going to change the URL. And so we're going to send asset mint testnet. I'm going to copy that. We're going to paste that into the URL. And as we go through this, we're going to make sure we don't forget to save. The first thing is first. We'll do our first thing. We're going to add authorization. We're going to add API key. And so this is the key. This is the header X API key. We're going to copy that, put that in the key value, key section. And then the value section is going to be your actual API key. And so we're going to go back to your developer console. We're going to create an API key. And so this is going to show you your first API key. If you go here after you've created it, you go back and log back in, you're not going to be able to see this. It'll be just blank, censored, some asterisks. So the reason why is because we want to make sure this API key is secure. And so you can only see this API key the first time you make it. If you lose it, or you misplace it, or you expose it and someone else can access it who shouldn't have it, which is basically anyone except you or your app, go ahead and delete it with this trash can icon on the side. For now, we're just showing you this process. We're going to delete this API key in the near future, and so we'll copy this and paste that into the value. Make sure you remove any of the extra space here. We'll add it to the header. We're just going to save it, and then cool, we have our header set up here. And the next section, as we go back to the documentation, is the data section. And I actually probably could include this additional header here before I go any further. We'll actually add an additional one. We'll have a content type. This tells the API key, or the API, you know, what kind of information are we sending? We're sending application JavaScript object notation. So don't have to worry about too much about what that means, but we'll just add that extra content type application / JSON, and that's one of the fields we have here. And then we're going to go into the body. We're going to first save this. We're going to go to the raw section, and you have the option to have JavaScript object notation or JSON. And you see this data section. And this is within the body of your request. This is the data. This is the data that you're making or you're creating and putting together in order to make the request, so that your API call has all of the necessary information so that DropChain can look at what you sent and then make the blockchain request on your behalf. So we're just going to copy that section. We're going to copy the first bracket and then the last bracket, everything in this area here. And we're going to paste that in. And then for each of these fields, we're going to fill in the information we want to have. And so first thing is app ID. If you remember from earlier, we're going to go and we're going to copy the app ID section here on the bottom left. Oops. We're going to paste that in between the double quotes. We're going to do the same thing with the user1 user ID, which is going to be your test user1 user ID. I'm going to copy that. And otherwise, we're just going to go along in each of these bullet points. I'm going to explain what these fields mean, right? So created asset amount is the asset amount in an integer. Int is integer. How many of the asset you're creating? So if you wanted to create something like Bitcoin, where it has 21 million tokens, we'll create 21 million in this case. And before we guess that, before we do this, we'll do our basics. Basic idea. We'll do 21 million here, and we'll have to modify this. This isn't what we'll say. But before I go ahead and fix this, we also want to include created asset decimals, and this is how many decimals each unit of one has. And so in the case of Bitcoin, it can go up to 8 decimals. It goes to 1/100 millionth. That's not 1/100 million, it's a millionth. And so that means that we go 0. If we're going to do 1 Bitcoin, we have a decimal here, and then we have to go 8 spaces to the right to have how many Bitcoin truly exist. And so in this case, we have 21 million, and then we would do 8 decimals. So we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's the maximum amount that 1 Bitcoin can be divided into. So these two fields work with one another. If you had 0 here, if you wanted to only make 21 million units, you would have 0 decimals. You would have nothing after the decimal. You wouldn't even have a decimal point. If you had 2 here, we'll show an example of this again after this test minute. If you wanted to have 2 here, you'd have 2. And in our case, we want to have 8 for Bitcoin. We're going to copy Bitcoin. So do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And because it's an integer, we need to get rid of the dots and then the commas. Delete the decimal, delete the comma, and we'll leave decimals as 8 because we want to have 8 of them. Asset name, let's just call it DropChain Bitcoin. Unit name is DBTC. We're just going to kind of make a copy for our test. Created asset URL. I'm going to use dropchain.network because that's the website that we want you to go to make a free account and start building a Web3 app with no code required. And session 1 token, you leave that blank. Don't forget to save, and we're going to hit send. And we've got a response back. We can see the data here. It has asset ID. What is an asset ID? An asset ID is the unique asset identifier for your asset we just minted, your Bitcoin NFT, or Bitcoin token rather. If you made a new token, maybe you made an NFT, or you made a different asset that isn't this DropChain Bitcoin, you'd have a unique asset ID, completely separate. That would be unique and would not be this asset ID. So take note of that. This is all the same information. Your sender address is a long string of letters, MQSK, and interestingly, if we go back to the console, MQSK. So your wallet address that we used for test user 1 is the exact same here as it is the information we got back. And then finally, we have a transaction ID, TX ID. And so because we're running on the test network, we have a test network blockchain explorer we can use to look at our requests. And so we'll go and try it. Go to Algo Explorer, and we're going to go to testnet.algo explorer, because this is the testnet version that we're using. And we'll paste the transaction ID right into the top. And we should see the exact same information from when we issued the transaction in the first place, right? And this is exactly right. Thursday, October 12th, that's right now when we're recording this. Asset unit at DBDC, exactly what I said. This is the same asset ID that we have right here. And so URL is the same. Again, we have 21 million DBTC units with 8 decimals that we can create. This is reflected exactly as we configured it earlier, and everything else not too crazy. So what you should notice is if we take the asset ID and we search the asset ID up, we're going to find this DropChain Bitcoin as the only asset under this asset ID. This is unique, and only the one asset we created is this asset. And it was made 2 minutes ago, exactly like we expect. We're going to go ahead and we're going to make a new asset. We're going to try a different one. We're going to try DropChain NFT. And in this case, if you have an NFT, you could have maybe 100 units. In this case, we're just going to do one. We're going to do 1 unit. And this time, NFTs can't be broken into pieces. I mean, maybe if you want to do a special NFT that does, go ahead and do that. But in our case, we don't want it to be broken into any amount. And so we're going to do 0 here. Because there should be 0 decimals after the 1 unit we're creating. And so when you look at this, what does this mean? It means that we're making one asset that cannot be divided into any different pieces. So it's indivisible, only one exists, and that's exactly what you want for an NFT. Maybe we want to do DNFT, we'll leave the URL the same, we'll leave the user ID and the app ID the same. And so don't forget to save at the top, and we're gonna send this request. And we should see a very similar response back from the DropChain API with the new asset ID and then the information for the DropChain NFT we just minted. And what do you know? Brand new asset ID, a brand new transaction ID. We have this information here. Let's take a look and paste the transaction ID into the testnet.algoexplorer.io. Exactly the same, DropChain NFT, DNFT. We have the unique asset ID, 1482, and we have the last 4 is 1482 here, so that matches perfectly. 1 unit, 1 supply, we have 0 decimals, and the URL is the same. So there you have it, right? You just use the DropChain API with Postman with 0 code required, create your NFT or token for the first time. You yourself can build robust Web3 applications using our tooling without needing to know anything about coding, or no need to know anything about smart contracts. You can build a no-code Web2 app using something like Bubble, which we have tutorials coming out on how to do that. And we still have some guides. Check below if you want to see a guide on how to do that. Also stuff like Webflow or Wix you can use to build apps with. Integrate the DropChain API and all of the Web3 smart contracts pre-made for you using just the DropChain API, ready to launch your Web3 app today. Please, if you haven't, make a free account on dropchain.network to get started, and then join the Discord. There's a link below. I'm in there, my co-founders are in there, other people who have already built Web3 apps using DropChain are ready to help people like yourself build and launch your first Web3 app. Thanks.